In this second topic, we are looking at a subtle but dangerous evolution in software security. How signing certificates became permanent release authority. We often treat certificates as just technical files, but in reality, they have become the keys to the kingdom. Signing certificates were never intended to represent standing release authority. Yet in modern enterprises, simply possessing a signing key often equates to having unconditional, long-lived permission to shift software into production. Let's look at how we got here. To understand the shift, we have to remember what certificates were actually built for. In early software models, certificates were purely for identity. They asserted who the publisher was, essentially a digital ID card. If the signature validated, the software was assumed to be authentic. There was never an expectation that these certificates will be responsible for encoding business approvals, release policies, or security vetting. They were meant to say who, not should be running. The reason this identity tool became an authority is convenience. We adopted certificates because they remove friction. Once a certificate was trusted by an operating system like Windows or a platform like Mac OS, every single binary signed with that certificate inherited that trust automatically. No additional review was required. This set it and forget it trust model is convenient for developers, but it creates a massive governance gap where trust is granted once and then never questioned again. One of the biggest technical hurdles is that code signing certificates typically have no scope. Most certificates do not restrict what may be signed. There is no native binding to a specific applications, a specific team, or a specific environment. If you have the key, you have total authority. A single key can authorize a critical kernel driver, a simple installer, or a third-party library equally. The certificate does not know the difference between a high-risk production release and a low-risk internal tool. We also have a timing problem. Certificate validity does not equal release relevance. Certificate expires based on a clock, usually 1 to 3 years. However, business context changes much faster. A certificate often remains active and valid long after the team that requested it has moved on, or the project it was created for has been cancelled. Because authority persists by default until a timer runs out, we have a, in quotes, zombie authority floating around our networks. Around our networks. Because the certificate is the only thing the operating system checks, whoever controls the private key controls the release. In practice, this means authority shifts away from your change management boards and your security officers and into the hands of whoever can access that file. This often includes build servers, automated tools, or junior developers who have no formal accountability for the company's release safety. The gatekeeper, in quotes, the gatekeeper is now a file, not a person or a process. This problem has been, in quotes, baked in by a modern automation. Assigning became a standard step in CI or CD in full continuous integration or continuous deployment pipelines. certificates quietly became machine-operated release authorities. Software is now signed automatically and at massive scale. This happens so fast and so frequently that it often occurs without any human awareness or manual approval checkpoints. We have automated the action of signing, but in doing so, we have automated the granting of authority without any oversight. This leads to a dangerous assumption. We confuse integrity with intent. A valid signature can tell you the code has not been tampered with, but it cannot tell you if that code was actually reviewed, tested, or approved. However, because downstream systems treat signed code as inherently in quotes trustworthy, we have collapsed at the concepts of integrity and authorization into one single unverified assumptions. We trust the code simply because the math works. Governance is not static, organizations evolve. We implement new security policies, new compliance requirements, and new leadership. But existing certificates are like ghosts. They continue to operate under old assumptions. They silently bypass your updated controls because they were issued before the new rules existed. They represent an older, potentially weaker version of your security posture that is still active in your environment today. If you look at modern supply chain attacks, the reality is sobering. Most signing abuse uses valid certificates. Attackers rarely spend time to break the heavy encryption of a signing system. Instead, they find a way to use the existing valid certificates. By compromising a build server or a developer's machine, they produce perfectly valid signatures. This renders traditional trust checks completely ineffective because, to the system, the attack looks like a legitimate, authorized release. The ultimate enterprise consequence is that release authority becomes invisible. When certificates function as permanent and managed credentials, leadership loses the ability to prove who authorized the release, why it happened, and what oversight was in place. We have created a world where software trust is assumed by default, but governed by no one. We are essentially flying blind, relying on a 30-year-old identity artifact to protect our entire production environment. To conclude, Topic 2. We have accidentally turned identity artifacts into standing release power. Signing certificates were never meant to be permanent, all-powerful gatekeepers. But because we lack scope, life cycle control, and centralized governance, that is exactly what they have become. In our next session, we look at the critical difference between integrity these certificates provide and the control that this enterprise actually needs.